introduce to all of us who is Professor Ehsan Samsi. Professor Ehsan Samsi Goski, medical doctor, PhD. He is the Director of Medical Ethics and History of Medicine, Research Center, Tehran University of Medical Sciences, Secretary of Biomedical Ethics and Philosophy of Medicine Council, Iran Academy of Medical Science, Director, National Research Ethics Committee, Ministry of Health and Medical Education, Advisor to the President and to the Director of Medical Ethics Department, Iran Medical Council, Member of National Clinic Ethics Committee, Ministry of Health and Medical Education, Member of National Bioethics Committee, Iranian National Commission for UNESCO, Member of the International Bioethics Committee, IBC, UNESCO 2018 to 2021. Professor Ehsan, I would like to introduce you a little bit to Professor Sunarto. He was also the member of International Bioethics Committee, UNESCO in year 2010 to 2000 and yeah, so I think he will join you to the discussion soon. Now I will give the time to Professor Triwibawa to give the presentation, and he will deliver about the UGM experience in developing rapid tests from the ethical point of view. And 30 minutes for you, Professor Triwibawa. Please, time for you. Oh, J. Share screen.
Thank you very much, Professor Sofia Mubarika, Prof. Rika, for the very nice introduction. And thank you very much for Professor Yati and Professor Sunarto, and for once again allow me to join the discussion in this Center of Bioethics and Humanity.
Professor Kiki.
And I'd like to
Professor.
I'd like to deliver some talk here. Though the OC asked me to talking about the REGA and rapid test, and just yesterday I asked to the organizing committee to change a bit what is about the topic of my talk, and then it is still concerned or related with the COVID-19, of course. So I'd like to as a member of the Research Ethics Committee and also the chairman of the Research Ethics Committee. Apakah slide-nya bisa dilihat ya? Mohon konfirmasi apakah slide bisa dipresani? Halo?
Halo, bisa Pak Triwibawa.
Oh, iya, Dr. Darwito, matur nuwun.
Bisa.
Once again, that this is just to start the discussion, that this is the protocols that that is submitted to our IRB, to our ethics committee. We are joined under our IRB is under the Faculty of Medicine and Public Health and Nursing in the UGM, and also joined with the Dr. Sarjito Hospital. So here is during the pandemic situation, start from April until 18 September, we accept around 94 protocols that is related with the COVID-19. So it is only the protocol that is the study is, and the topic of the study is COVID-19. As you see here that the most of them are observational studies, and then a medical record, and also the 14 clinical trial here. So I like to talk about what is the ethical issue that is might related in the clinical trial that we discuss in our IRB or ethical committee. And we're going to start with this is the phrase that is come from the WHO that in all cases, including in the emergency situation like now, we have a pandemic COVID-19. It is our obligation as a researcher and also a member of IRB to uphold the international accepted ethical standards. Though sometimes we may allow to adopt or adjust the standard in a particular circumstance in particular contexts. Yeah, and now I'm starting with a clinical trial that is related with a therapy. This is the issue that might be considered or might be discussed before we preparing the clinical trial protocol during the pandemic COVID-19, especially for the for the clinical trial that is related with a therapy like a new drug, or it can be modern drug, or even it is herb or natural product that is going to be applied to the COVID-19 patient. So one thing that we have to consider first is that sometimes when we do the selection of the investigational product itself or candidate of the drug itself, sometimes we have only very limited data. For example, before we try applying to human, we should seeking for the data for the preclinical or even in vitro only. So sometimes there is a need, or there is a urge or from the researcher that based on the in vitro or very limited data, we're going to apply it in the phase 1 or of clinical trial, for example. So we have to really be careful to scrutinize about this thing. And then the second is that the selection of the participant of this clinical trial. So the discussion should be included about the issue. It is going to be include or not include the most severe patients. And then we also have to discuss about the inclusion or exclusion of the vulnerable subjects, for example, children or woman that is a pregnant woman, for example. And then the other is also some clinical trial they trying to exclude or include the person that have comorbidities, for example. So the discussion about this is to be should be very careful, because we are not going to put the subject in a very high risk, but we are not going to accept also the study that is not valid or scientifically not sound. And then the other issue is that the study design itself. Yeah, we need to scrutinize what how is randomization happen and how is using placebo. Talking about the placebo for the treatment of the COVID-19, we know that there is no standard, no solid standard treatment for the COVID-19, because now as we know that COVID-19 is a new disease. We only have the experience, say, 9 months from now. Even in Indonesia, maybe only 6 months or even less than that. So using placebo and randomization and auto blinding will be a hot issue to be discussed with the IRB member when we have a application for the to the ethics committee. And then the other possibility is about the bias of the assessment of clinical endpoint, because the symptoms and sign and also the clinical manifestation of COVID-19 itself is not really clear. In that case, to judge or assess the clinical endpoint for the researcher and also the clinician should be discussed very thoroughly. Otherwise, we are not going to have a good result because of the difficulty to judge the clinical endpoint. And then the other is assessment of the safety itself. If we're talking about the clinical trial, meaning that we're going to give a new drug or even that is not even before considered as a safe remedy for patient, and now we are including patient that has a very fatal infectious disease. So we have to be careful how to assess the safety of the drug itself. And then the other issue is the sample size estimation. If we ask to the person, like for example, for the epidemiologist, now they maybe cannot really sure to give a prevalence number, for example, for the COVID-19 itself, because maybe we are under detection or even because the dynamic of the COVID-19 cases in every places in our country now is very dynamic, very fast to be changed. For example, maybe this week this city is in a red zone, but maybe another week will be in a black or even worsen situation. And then the other is the RB review approval. We need approval, as we know that everybody want to do the research in COVID-19. So the demand of the need of the review from the IRB will be very high. In that case, maybe the IRB review will be overloaded, and then because of that, might affect the judgment of the IRB member. Then the last is the informed consent, of course. Okay, that's for the when we doing writing protocol or we are planning to do the research related to the COVID-19. What about the impact of the COVID-19 with the ongoing clinical trial? As we know that in our hospital also many clinical trials happen before COVID-19, not related to the COVID-19. But because of the COVID-19, the situation is changed. Then the situation changed. It might be related to the sponsor itself. Many sponsors saying that now you have to do COVID-19 research instead of another research, or we calling sometimes with COVIDization. Everybody have to talking about COVID-19. And then the regulatory body also the same thing. We are going to push the research about the COVID-19. IRB also will give the priority for the COVID-19 only, but not for the other COVID-19 research, for example. So because of this change of the policy, maybe it will change the resource that is need by the ongoing clinical trial that is not related with the COVID-19. It might change the recruitment because many hospitals now prioritize for the COVID-19. So the recruitment for the patient that is not COVID might be compromised. The facility also occupied by the COVID-19 patient. The follow-up of care is because we we prioritize the safety for the patient. Maybe we cannot invite patient for the follow-up care because we may protect them from being infected by COVID-19 from the patient that is have COVID-19 that is in the hospital. So because of the safety of the subject and also the researcher should be always prevail. So that might be change this one. We may change the follow-up visit, and also there might be resulting in protocol violation and protocol deviation. And this protocol violation and protocol deviation might be the job for the IRB to review, is it really good enough to be continued? It is ethically can be acceptable or not? And then the other the other possibility is that there is a need to accelerate the clinical trial that is ongoing because of the COVID-19 COVID-19 situation. So it was there was a ethical issue that might be correlated with a clinical trial related with the treatment. And then we also have experience to have clinical trial that is related with a medical device, new medical device invention. Like before, Prof. Sophia Mubirika mentioning that she's leading a group that is develop a rapid test, for example. So it need also clinical trial in a patient in the hospital to measure the performance or accuracy of the validity of the medical device, the new medical device. Other group develop maybe ventilators. Other group develop the new technology that is attached to the mask, for example. And then what is the ethical issue that might be happen, it might be rise when we do the clinical trial related to the new device is this one. We need strong ethical review board or international review board. We need very strong ethic committee because we need independent ethic review because sometimes new device related with the political and also social and economical uh, consideration. So we need independent ethic review, and but we have to careful because we have many review board, review ethical committee. Even in hospital also, every hospital they have ethical committee. So some of them insist to review every protocol that is going to be applied to their hospital. So if we doing the clinical trial for example, 10 hospital, then we have to deal with the 10 ethic committee. So we need to make sure that this duplication of review will not be happen. So also we need a IRB that facilitate the research for the expedited review also. For example, for clinical trial, usually it is going to be review in full board review. If the IRB or the able to do a full board review every month, then we have to wait maybe 1 month for the review for the clinical trial person. But some of the ethic review, like our ethical review, we prioritize we do the expedited process for the research that is concerning about COVID-19, for example. And then the other is the change of the methodology. Yeah, some we agree that the it is not ethically acceptable if the methodology is not scientifically valid and have a social value. However, we also have room to modify the methodology, saying so the methodology can be executed that is give a room for the researcher to do some modification because of the situation of the COVID-19. For example, we need to accept the sample size modification because of the COVID-19 situation, for example. or we accept for the modification of the obtaining written informed consent, for example, because some of the patients have a very bad condition, and the safety of the researcher should not be directly interact with the patient without uh, any protection. So the informed consent, written informed consent, sometimes can be waived or changed because become a verbal informed consent, for example. Then also the participant selection is important, yeah, because we going to prove that the new medical device is really effective to diagnose or to support the treatment or the management of COVID-19 patients. So we need to make sure that the participants will be treated in equal respect, and also the person that is involved in this research should be protecting from the being exposed for the maximum risk. So we have to make sure that the minimum risk is only minimum risk can be exposed to the participant. We are not allowing the high risk that is not necessarily happen to the participant. The last thing that we have to consider is the informed consent itself. As I described before, sometimes we have this situation. We saying the researcher saying to the recruited patient saying that it is better to do something than nothing. So why don't you uh, 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 join us in this research, for example? So this one is not really good enough for us to protect the the uh, the the subject, because of we changed the mindset of the subject that actually we can do better, we do something with a new technology that is might not be properly enough to diagnose or to support the patient itself, for example. And then the last thing is that we need to discuss the ethical issue that is related with the vaccine trial. As we know that vaccine is the most invention that might be help for the society in the world to protect the transmission of the COVID-19 disease. So the first issue that we have to raise, the ethical issue that might be happen when we planning or doing and also reviewing the protocol related to the vaccine clinical trial is that how to assess the safety of the vaccine itself. We should assess the side effect, the side effect of the vaccine itself, and also the quality of the uh, uh, vaccine itself. And the last thing is that we need to see the efficacy of the vaccine itself. This safety issue is raised because of there are many conflicting interests between the researcher and the institute that is testing the vaccine itself, because when there is a need from the society, there is urgency from the researcher, there is urgency also from the sponsor, for example. So sometimes when we trying to uh, consider the safety, it might not be really in a good balance because of this one. And the other is that it is sometimes in this pandemic situation, the vaccine development is changed. In regular situation, we admitted that the vaccine will be developed maybe 5 year, 10 year, even 15 or 20 years before we have the vaccine. But because of this need of the vaccine in this to protect people from COVID-19, so the pharmaceutical industries, the government sometimes somehow they put the bulk financial support before we have the good candidate or promising candidate, or another word based on the very limited data they have already invest many billion or even more. So that why the because it is related with the very bulk financial properties. So sometimes it is going to be deteriorate the ability to balance for us to measure the safety of the candidate vaccine itself. Yeah. And the other is that because the vaccine development will be involving many places, many government, many society. For example, maybe the first phase will be done in China, second phases in China, third phase will be in Indonesia, for example. So the clinical trial data that is done in the phase one in China, for example, maybe not easily obtained by the person that is involved in this safety consideration in Indonesia, that is going to judge is it really good enough to proceed for the phase three, for example. So the safety, how to judge the safety is crucial, and it's going to be very related with the ethical issue. And then the second will be the study design of vaccine clinical trial itself. Yeah, is it really placebo acceptable here? And then most important is how is the post-trial access for the subject that is involved in this clinical trial. Do they going to have the vaccine, or are they going to be prioritized when the vaccine will be in the market, for example? Or if Indonesia's people involving in this clinical trial, do the company will prioritize for Indonesian people to have the first shot of the first dose of the vaccine itself, for example? So it is important also to be discussed. The next issue will be the population of that population that is involving in the clinical trial for the vaccine itself. So some of them are children. Yeah, as we know that we usually doing the clinical trial for the usually we going to do in adult first, and then after that, if it is good enough, safe enough, then we're going to invite the children and also the elderly. But for this situation, is that approach is good enough because we need to protect everybody. Uh, Although the children now is recognized as the lowest probability being infected by COVID-19, for example. And then the other issue will be the location of the clinical trial of the vaccine itself. Is it going to be involving in the developing countries? As we know that the vaccine developer usually originate from the developed countries. They have money, they have resource, and then after that they develop candidate vaccine and they're going to do trial in the developing countries. Do they have the same the same chance for these developing countries people to have bargaining power for the equity of the right to have the right to develop vaccine, and then after development finish, do they have the same right to get the vaccine, or they just become a location for the trial, but actually they are not going to have the vaccine itself, for example. And then the other issue is sometimes the subject will be involving population that have the vulnerable in case of lower education, or they are poor, or they are in the economically not good enough to have a bargain for the vaccine developer. And the last thing is that the facility of uh, the healthcare. For example, we are in Yogyakarta city. We perform vaccine clinical trial, for example, and then after that we have to consider: is that really the medical facility that is going to be used if there is an new outbreak because of this vaccine trial will be enough to facilitate the possibility of the outbreak, the second wave outbreak after vaccine trial, for example. Yeah. So we have to consider about it. Then the next issue for the vaccine development is informed consent. It is about the language. It is about to find the appropriate legal guardian, if it is children or if it is vulnerable person, for example. And then the next issue will be ancillary care. So we need to convince the vaccine developer to give ancillary care to the society and also to the individual that is involving in the vaccine clinical trial. It should be optimum, not too much, but not very little. If it is too much, then it is including into inducement for the individual or for the society. But it need, because it is going to be reflecting for the good care for the subject and society that is involved in the vaccine trial. And then the last thing is that the issue about control human infection. Control human infection is the protocol that we going to allow some people, they intentionally infected by the pathogen, to prove that this person that is already vaccinated will be protected from the infection. So it is possibly will be a hot topic to be discussed, especially for the ethicists, because usually the person will saying that it is not ethical to do the controlled human infection. However, for this vaccine developer and also the scientists, it is possibly to propose the controlled human infection, because in certain conditions, controlled human infection will be help us to facilitate the the development of vaccine itself. I mean, if we are not doing this controlled human infection, we may have the handicap to develop vaccine. First, maybe we don't have the animal model that is really mimicking the human. And then the second thing, in the phase 3, if we using this control human infection, we may faster the process. So we don't need to test in the phase 3 for a long time because of the changing approach using controlled human infection. However, some of us, of course, is going to be saying that it is unethical because, the controlled human infection approach might be already done before for the development of the malaria, for example, malaria vaccine, for example, or other cholera vaccine, for example. But in that situation is different with this COVID-19 because for those diseases like malaria and cholera, there is a established treatment for the person that is being infected, and then they have a clinical manifestation. There is a standard treatment that is already proved, and it is possibly will help the person that has a side effect. But for this COVID-19, of course, it is different situation because there is no standard treatment that's already admitted as a gold standard for the treatment for the COVID-19. So it is possible that the person that is being infected with the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus uh, will be in a bad condition or even fatal because of that. So it is going to be hot discussion about counter-human infection for the vaccine development. However, on May 6, 2020, WHO released the recommendation that the controlled human infection or intentionally infection in research participants can be ethically acceptable under the certain condition. That is going to be tough for us to make sure that the condition is really acceptable to be to be fit for the controlled human infection. And then I think my talk will be I will summarize within 2 sentences only. The first is that though there is a problematic or many pro and contra, we still have to saying that ethical standard must be upheld even in emergency pandemic situation. So this is the job of the member of the ethics committee and also the sponsor and also the researcher to make sure that the ethical standard for the research should be maintained even during emergency or pandemic and COVID-19 situation. And then the second is that the modification of the certain part of methodology and administrative thing of the research might be acceptable under certain condition. And this certain condition will be the place where the sponsors, the researchers, and also the member of the ethics committee to discuss. The most important is the safety for the subject that is involved in this clinical trial. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Professor Triwibawa, for the very important message you have just shared with us, how important is the ethical standard that need to be upheld, but also there are some problems that we face. There's certainly in ethical issues on clinical trial, and then also on medical devices and vaccine trial. Now we open for the discussion for another 30 minutes, about 30 minutes. If there is there any question in the chat? Could you, if there is? Professor? At the end? Oh, okay. Prof. Tri, there is an idea that can we have the second speaker first, then we can have a discussion together.
Yes,
Is that all right?
yes, please. No,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
thank
good.
you so much. Okay, now comprehensive discussion. So I will now invite Professor Ehsan Shamsi, MD PhD, for the presentation about research ethics in COVID-19 outbreak in Iran. So about 30 minutes, Prof, time for you, please.
Thank you very much, the organizers of this interesting meeting, and I wish you have my voice clearly so I can proceed.
Clear, very clear, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. I need to thank Professor for very interesting talk that mainly clarified the ethical issues inside a research ethics committee while approving and while evaluating research proposals of COVID-19 clinical trials or COVID-19 vaccine or diagnostic or treatment issues. My talk will be more emphasized and concentrated on the regulatory issues in this area. So the research ethics experience of Islamic Republic of Iran during the COVID-19 pandemic from a regulatory point of view, and also I will point some issues from normative research ethics as well. As Assistant Professor of Medical Ethics in Tehran University of Medical Science and Medical Ethics and History of Medicine Research Center, and also the Secretary of National Research Ethics Committee, I will try to first explain the biomedical research ethics in Iran shortly, and then turn to the COVID-19 experience. In Iran, we have a biomedical ethics system inside the Ministry of Health and Medical Education under the supervision of His Excellency Professor Larijani, who is the Vice Chair for the Supreme Council for Medical Ethics. And we have the Secretariat of the Supreme Council for Medical Ethics in the Medical Ethics and History of Medicine Research Center. Under this Supreme Council, there are three national committees: National Medical Ethics Education Committee, National Clinical Ethics Committee, which I'm a member of that, and also National Research Ethics Committee, which is our discussion today. The main idea behind this National Research Ethics Committee is research integrity, which means that we try to standardize different levels of research in the country, including the proposing the research, review and approval process, standard operation of research, standard documentation of research, and standard publication of research. So this committee was established in 1998 in Iran, and now there are three levels of committees inside the country. The first is National Research Ethics Committee, which is a regulatory body, and also we have a regional or university research ethics committees, and also the third level are institutional research ethics committees in some big research centers. This system has three main arms. The first is introduction of research ethics standards. Although Iranian system accepts international standards like Declaration of Helsinki and other standards like GCP and some guidelines, but National Research Ethics Committee in Iran tries to adopt these issues according to our domestic issues and to check the situation with the religious issues which are important in our system. The second mandate of National Research Ethics Committee is strengthening the research ethics committees inside the universities and try to help them and do capacity building for these institutions, for these research ethics committees as our main body to do these mandates inside university. And the third issue is setting a disciplinary system for those people who do not follow the standard method and have various kind of deviations. So there is a distribution of research ethics committees inside the country. More than 220 research ethics committees are distributed in different parts of the country. And all of them are based in one national portal. This national portal has different works. The main issue is that all research ethics committees are accredited by the National Research Ethics Committee through this website, through this portal, and all the issues are online. And each research ethics approval is indexed in one indexing system and is available for public, and everyone can see which projects have been approved by the research ethics committees in the country. I will explain this more next. So every research ethics committee accreditation certificate, the detail and the members and the approvals could be seen in this system. And also Iran has a specific Iranian registry of clinical trials, which is a part of WHO ICTRP initiative for clinical trials, and is an international registry system that this is a mandatory issue for all researchers to register their clinical trial protocols in this system. And almost all the research ethics committees are connected to this national portal. It means that at the same time that one research ethics committee approves one research proposal, the certificate is issued inside this portal. So it could be seen online by the National Ethics Committee and also by other people at the same time. Now I turn to the issue of COVID-19 and our experience in Iran. You know, the COVID-19 was not the first pandemic, but it seems to be the pandemic of the century. So we had some experiences, for example, in Ebola epidemic in 2014, that the situation was critical. And at that time, you remember that the Security Council of the United Nations held a meeting to address this issue. At that time, the main issue, for example, was that many airlines and shipping companies were suspending their flights and their travel to the infected areas like Congo. And at that time, the WHO asked the Security Council to ask those companies and airlines to open their ways so the help and the things could be transferred to the, for example, African countries that were main infected places. But now in COVID-19, the situation was on the other side. In the global health ethics level, we had the problem of there was some requests for closing the borders, not opening them. So the situation was completely different. In Iran, we had a very responsive system from the research stakeholders inside the country regarding this issue. You know, the issue was that, for example, in Ebola, it was a known disease, but it was not a pandemic. But we knew the Ebola before 2014. But regarding the COVID-19, we didn't know this. It was really a new and an emerging disease. So in this case, the issue of research was very close to the issue of treatment, and they were completely mixed. And this makes the situation completely different with our other experiences in the field. In this part, I can say that until now, according to our national portal that is available for all the audience of this meeting also, you can see it in the address bar that I put in this slide. According to this system, about 4,000 research projects have been ratified and approved by research ethics committees in Iran, more than 200 research ethics committees regarding the COVID-19. They are very various from RCTs, around 370 of these projects are RCTs that have been registered in Iran Registry of Clinical Trials. And all other are basic science. We have about 40 research projects related to COVID-19 vaccines in that are preclinical research, and the clinical trial, human clinical trials for COVID-19 vaccines should only ratified by the approved and evaluated by the national committee. So until now, we do not have any RCTs for COVID-19 vaccines, although in Iran there are promising preclinical research that maybe in next month we would start our clinical phases of clinical trials inside the country. So we saw that a lot of researchers responded to this issue. But one of the first issues that was very conflicting in the country regarding the interface between treatment and between treatment and research was how physicians can give treatment to their patients while there is not a standard care for the COVID-19 patients. In absence of a standard care, physicians thought that they may help their patients. For example, from the first days, the issue of prescribing dexamethasone or prednisolone or methylprednisolone pulses were one option. Many physicians, when they looked at their patients in ICUs, they thought that maybe this corticosteroids will help the patients, because they witnessed that many patients are dying from the immune system responses and not the direct infection of the virus. So they thought that this corticosteroids may be helpful. Other example is using the Actemra, which is a tocilizumab drug that was used for rheumatoid patients. And because in COVID-19, the interleukin-6 level of the patients were very high in some cases, and this tocilizumab would help for IL-6 increase in rheumatoid arthritis and rheumatoid patients. Many people thought that this would help, and now we have clinical trials that it is very helpful. At least our clinical trial in Iran shows that it is helpful for ICU patients. What is the mandate and what is the moral obligation of those physicians? Should they prescribe or no? In this regard, the National Research Ethics Committee used the 37th article of the Declaration of Helsinki and asked those physicians that use such interventions, according to the Helsinki Declaration, need to such interventions should be administered based on sound evidence for after consultation with other physicians. Such intervention need to be subsequently object to research projects, and obtaining valid informed consent from patients or their surrogate decision makers is a key issue. So yes, physicians can do logical interventions, but these interventions need to be object of research projects, because we do impose risks in some cases, and what is a good justification for those risks is the subsequent benefits that come out from the future research results, which may help others and also the patients. The second issue that we encountered in National Research Ethics Committee was voices that asked us to some extent, relaxing the approval process of research. We asked our research ethics committees and our medical universities, the research part of the universities, yes, we accept the acceleration, we accept more rapid review, but we do not accept any exception from science peer review and ethical review. So we asked them to do it very fast, 40 hours, as to give the first response to the applicant. It was not override ethical evaluation, and also we have scientific committees that review the proposals from a scientific point of view, and then after approval of that committee, the proposal comes to research ethics committee. So our research ethics committees usually evaluate those proposals that are approved and ratified by a scientific committee. So both these steps need to be completely observed. There was other issues. The National Research Ethics Committee is not the only body in Iran that is responsible for research. And Iran FDA, that we call it Food and Drug Organization, or FDO in Iran, is another main stakeholder, especially for those drugs that are not registered in Iranian pharmacopoeia. So we had one online system involve all research ethics stakeholders, including the FDA of Iran, to evaluate those research proposals that have sponsors from pharmaceutical companies, because the pharmaceutical companies are completely related with FDA. Although the research is done in university hospitals and in university settings, but the pathway is through FDA. So we had a very close relation in this regard. I can say the main feature of Iran research ethics experience in COVID-19 was using that national portal that we have now in Iran. I explained for you. This national portal gave us a post-approval surveillance possibility. It means that after ratification of this proposals in each research ethics committee, that according to the legal documents and law, they can ratify and approve the research ethics, the research proposal. But the national committee established a system to post-approval surveillance. Every day, we reviewed all proposals that were ratified and approved by different research ethics committees. And in case of any ambiguity or any question about the risk of those research projects, the National Ethics Committee contacted directly the research ethics committee that approved that proposal, and we asked them to send us the whole proposal and to evaluate that. And we canceled more than 20 research ethics committee approvals because of their weak evaluation system. And also 4 research ethics committees were suspended because their approval system and evaluation system was unacceptable. They reassigned after changes that was required by the National Research Ethics Committee. Another experience in the national level was how to distribute donated drugs, because Iran was one of the first countries after China that were very greatly infected by the virus, and there were many drugs that were sent to Iran. For example, we had donations from WHO or from other countries, mainly China. For example, Actemra, Remdesivir, Favipiravir, other drugs that we set up a system how to use these drugs inside clinical trials and not allow anyone to use them outside the clinical trials, because most of them, almost all of these drugs were under investigation and under clinical trial phases. The other experience was announcing the research results in the media. In the COVID-19 pandemic, media were very active. People and the population and the media and civil society wanted positive news and good news about discovering drugs and vaccines, and they put pressure on the researchers. So sometimes researchers gave positive news, but the news was not confirmed by the authorities of the country, like National Research Ethics Committee or COVID-19 Supreme Council, or for example, the FDA. So we try to control these news releases by the investigators. And in some cases, we gave feedback to them and asked them to correct their previous press release. Another experience was with the Solidarity trial. This trial was launched by the WHO, and they asked the different countries to include patients in this trial. The National Research Ethics Committee approved the research protocol in Iran, and it was very fast approval, although we were in very close contact with WHO Research Ethics Committee in this regard. And also it was a very good experience for us to working with WHO Research Ethics Committee, and also to support our co-investigators in Iran. Now, Iran has the highest number of patients involved in this international program. I need to mention 2 other issues more related to those discussions that Professor Wibawa explained. The first is that we have our main problem in Iran was with some clinical trials that had claims about the efficacy and for use and doing clinical trials on traditional products. And there were a great request for doing clinical trials with herbal products and traditional products. This is one thing. And although we have more than 50 clinical trials using those products, that they had the minimum level of standard for doing clinical trials, but we had more pressure to do that. This is, I think, a common issue. We discussed it with EMRO, Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office of WHO, and also headquarters, and we witnessed that this is the same problem in other countries. The other issue was that many basic scientists who had some theories about drugs, we already know that from 10,000 components that theoretically could be effective in medical treatment, only 5 reached to clinical trial phases. It means that among 2,000 theoretical and conceptual drugs, only 1 comes to clinical trials. The COVID-19 was a situation that many people thought that this could be facilitated. And for example, we had many proposals that for some components, some of them were well-established drugs with known safety profiles to be used for their antiviral or antivirus effects. So we tried to, it was very hard to evaluate those things. And one thing was that connecting the basic scientists to the clinical clinicians and attending physicians that accept to test those drugs on their physicians was another issue. The clinical scientists were greatly resisting against those theoretical issues, and those theologians wanted to bypass the animal studies and also some laboratory studies. And finally, we had also some proposals for using new molecules, not well-established drugs, but new molecules, some of them genetic, biomaterials, composites for do that. And again, it was very hard for National Research Ethics Committee to evaluate those things in a very short period of time. I think that now I can finish my lecture, and maybe other things will be addressed in the discussion time. Thank you again, and looking forward to answering the question, if any. Thank you.
Goski, let's give applause to him, and thank you so much. I think both of you already have some points that can be discussed together, and I invite for the comments and discussion and questions if there are. I'm sure there are so many. Question from Professor Shafaatun Al-Mizana. Thank you so much, Professor Shafa. Professor Shafa is, I think, Professor, you good friend from Professor Esan, yeah? Okay. The question is about, she mentioned last time, Professor Komisarov in one of our conference mentioned that there is obvious need for vaccine, but there are risks of cutting corner in the testing process first. And then second, there is a danger of igniting anti-vaccination sentiments. And the third, there are implications of commercially driven development process. What do you think about those? If those can be happen in Iran, what can we do to prevent them or deal with them? Okay, please, Professor Esan, maybe you can answer questions from Professor Shafaatun.
Thank you very much, Professor Shafa, for your very interesting question. I know Professor Komisarov, if he's the one I mentioned, he's in Sydney, Australia, and very famous in the field. I think that the pressure of pharmaceutical companies in the field of vaccine is a real one. So there is a very great competition nowadays. Now I'm a member of a national committee for COVID vaccine in Iran by the nomination of Minister of Health. And yesterday we had discussions, very tough discussions on this issue. For doing clinical trials of the vaccine, there are very special steps. For example, those vaccines that are using deactivated virus, they try to use deactivated virus. The industrial production of that much virus needs very big, requires very big places with biosafety level 3, BSL3, places and fields. That is very, very hard to achieve for many countries. And other vaccines have the same technical issues. So I can say that production of vaccines has its very critical issues in laboratory phase, in animal phase, and also in clinical trials. We should not ignore the animal phase and laboratory phase, because it's noticeable amount of virus that are cultured for deactivation escape from those biosafety, those laboratories. It is a catastrophic event in any country. So we need to consider that as well. But for clinical trials also, in Iran, really we do not think about bypass any standard practice of doing clinical trials of vaccines. And still we have this technology in our country. Different groups have developed even mRNA technology, but when we are trying to review this proposal for clinical trials very carefully. And for this, we in Iran, we put a regulation that only National Research Ethics Committee can approve the clinical trials, and not any research ethics committee, because legally any research ethics committee that is accredited by the Minister of Health is eligible to approving proposal. But in this special case, and this is the first case and the only case that the National Research Ethics Committee asked for a national approval for clinical trials, because we understand the sensitivities about this issue. Nowadays, many companies from China, India, other countries come to Iran, and they propose to selling vaccines, and they propose, for example, to do clinical trials inside the country. But we look at them very carefully, because we understand the role of pharmaceutical companies in this regard. And there is many questions, even in COVAX initiative in WHO, accelerator for diagnostic and preventive and treatment for COVID vaccine, which is a working group, ethics working group that I participate as a member. Even in that place, there are very great concerns about this issue. My solution is that the National Research Ethics Committees or National Ethics Committees of each country need to evaluate each proposal for selling vaccines, for doing clinical trials in that country, and also buying those vaccines very carefully in the national level. I don't think that there are voices for example, doing human challenge tests, as Professor Vibawa mentioned in his slides, and in some controlled infecting people, controlled infecting. And sometimes there are positive voices on this, and even WHO ethics committee had some positive voices about that, as you mentioned. But still, there is very great concerns about this issue, that this kind of controlled infecting people comes to the South country. And we need to be very careful about this issue. Even there is a possibility to do controlled infection that personally I'm not sure about it. It should be carefully done, and the issue of justice and equitable enrollment of people should be closely observed. I think I gave my answers to the question of Professor Shafa, but I'm still open to the next question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there are still many more questions. Could you put on the, yeah. And then the next question will be from, the next question, please, from Iran, from Ms. Pone. She would like to know about how many research proposals have been submitted since beginning of COVID-19, maybe in both countries, or maybe, yeah. And, I mean in Indonesia, yeah, to Professor Triwibawa. And how many clinical trials, if Professor Triwibawa may know. Please, Professor Triwibawa, you may answer the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yes, I mentioned, as I mentioned in the very beginning of my presentation, that during this COVID-19 pandemic situation, start from April until September, our ethic committee, our university ethic committee and hospital ethic committee received 94 protocol, that is research. The topic of research is COVID-19. Of course, there are many more for the research that is not related with the COVID-19, and 14 of them are clinical trial. So it is around, yeah, it is around 14 to 13% of the protocol is clinical trial. The clinical trial may related with treatment, natural product for the drug development, drug discovery, and also other is like serum convalescence clinical trial, and also other things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what Professor Triwibawa mentioned is done at Gajah Mada University.
Yes.
So maybe at the national level, you can maybe calculate many more, a lot of maybe research proposal have been submitted.
Yes, sure.
I'm sure, yeah. Okay, is that all right, Ms. Pune, for the question, the answer? Okay, okay, thank you so much. Okay, for the next one, please. The next question. From Dr. Erlina PhD from Indonesia to Professor Triwibawa. She asked about the patient. What patient did you have when you see there was opportunity to develop rapid tests? And what's ethical dilemma that you find so far? So there is a critical issues to develop this case into further ethical dilemma discussion that may impact on vulnerable population. Please, Professor Tri.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, in that time, Professor Rika, maybe you can, Sophia Memberica, you may add also, because you are the leading investigator for the development of the rapid test. As my understanding is that we have the idea to develop the rapid test in the very beginning of pandemic situation in that time. It's around the first case in Indonesia is in March 2020, declared by the President of President Jokowi. And then after that, maybe 1 month later, we have discussion, and then we decide to do the exploration of the possibility to have a rapid test, because first is that gold standard that is using the RT-PCR in that time is very the availability in Indonesia is very. That time we have only around 10 until, and then after that expanded become 100 laboratory spreading in the country that is able to do the RT-PCR. And of course the timer turning the turnaround time for the RT-PCR in that time very long, maybe 1 week, 2 week, or even more. So we decide to do the exploration possibility to have some tests that is going to be more rapidly and more available in the field. That's the first. I think that is the main idea. And then if the question is that what is the ethical dilemma for that? Yeah. As we know in Indonesia, COVID-19 diagnosis is very very hot topic. I mean, it is going to be related with the stigmatization and also maybe also panic situation in the society. Once you have a positive case in your neighbor, then many things can be happen. Though maybe you may have even filed action from the neighborhood because of that in the very beginning. So because of the accuracy of the rapid test is being developed, so sometimes it is going to be troublesome. Even that this happen also for the RT-PCR. Once you have RT-PCR positive, and then the same situation is happening. So you may have stigmatization, and also you have to be isolated in certain situation that is might be maybe make a person not really ready to be test by rapid test and also by the RT-PCR. So that is the ethical dilemma, because we offering sometimes that is actually it is complementary only for the main diagnosis tools, that is RT-PCR. But because the situation in the society is always black and white. I mean, why RT-PCR positive and why rapid test negative? What is the consequences and how we can deal with that? That is the question that is going to be raised by the people in the society. And we now have to convince the people that actually it is as a complementary medical tool should be joined with other medical device to diagnose. As we know that in the clinic, we don't have any situation where one tools can be just 100% to diagnose a disease, present or not present. So we have to educate the society that actually as a medical device, it should be judged and it should be interpreted by the expert, but not by the lay person that is not really understand about the test itself. That's my maybe I can. It is good enough or not for my question, for the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Triwibowo. I think I don't need to have additional answer because he is the leader of the validation test in the population. So he gave the whole lot of the information. Next question, if there is. Is there any more? From Dr. Wika Hartanti from Indonesia, for both speakers. Please kindly share the views or organization management of National Research Ethics Committee the benefits and issues with having hierarchical structure of research ethics committee in a country, considering the independency of each research ethics committees and the power of dynamics. Please, maybe Professor Ihsan first, then Professor Triwibawa.
Thank you very much from this very important question. Exactly this kind of management of the research ethics committees has benefits and maybe some shortcomings. I think that according to our experience in Iran, before 2014, we didn't have any accreditation system. To be more careful about the wording, this is not a really hierarchical system. For example, the National Ethics Committee, the Research Ethics Committee, does not appoint the people of each research ethics committee. It means that when there is a request according to the research project in one organization, one institution or university to have a research ethics committee, this National Research Ethics Committee is an accreditation body. It means that it receives the proposal for organizing that committee in that institution or university, and then we have standards for that. For example, to be more careful about the independence issue, each committee has a layperson, has a legal expert, and they are not usually persons inside the universities. They come from outside. But we accept that there are some concerns about the independency of the committee, not in the independency from the researchers. They are completely independent from researchers. But the problem is that independency from organization, because, for example, universities have some tendency to do more research, to have more papers, and to have more higher ranking in the research rankings. And this may be a problem that some university managers look at the research ethics committees as a potential obstacle for having more research and more papers. But generally, we can say after 6 years of practicing this accreditation system, its benefits is more than the harm, because before that, there was not any accreditation system to say that if there is something, there is a real research, even a real research ethics committee. You can see in the many countries, we have this problem that you see a number that claims that this proposal is ratified and approved by one research ethics committees, and this paper comes out from that research. But there is not a system for checking the authenticity of this approval. Everyone can claim that. So I think that there is a need, an urgent need, for an international accreditation system for research ethics committees to see the authenticity and the to be assured about the composition and the quality of that research ethics committee system. So I think that this system first is not a hierarchical system. People are not nominated by the higher committee. The only issue that the higher committees evaluate the lower committee. So it is more a regulatory system than a hierarchical system. And if a lower level committee, for example, an institutional research ethics committee, does not approve one proposal, the researcher can go and ask for reviewing again in the higher committee, and finally there is the National Research Ethics Committee. This gives the researchers to follow their research better, and also to prevent having fake ethics committees in some cases. That there are many cases in the international level, and we see every day. And we propose to have this system as an international initiative also to WHO, and we are talking with them, and we are proposing this to also EMRO, Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office, and maybe in future we will see that like clinical trial registering system, we will have a such registration system for research ethics committee.
Thank you, Prof. Ehsan. And Prof. Triwibawa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think it is the same case in our cases in Indonesia, like in Iran, that the Research Ethics Committee in Indonesia have no hierarchical structure. There is a national ethics committee that is belong to the Ministry of Health, but this National Ethics Committee is not really have a commanding path to the other ethics committee in Indonesia, meaning that there is no hierarchical. And then it is much more as a forum for the communication between research ethics committee, though the sharing the possibility to increase their ability to review, their capability to review, and the quality of the review. So they give the training, they give a forum for seminar and also discussion. But each of this ethics committee actually independent. They can just decide based on their own review process. And then once again, for example, another example exactly similar is that if one researcher apply for ethic review from our university, for example, and then after that maybe the review is not really in parallel with their plan, then they can apply for other review from other research ethics committee, like shopping like that. But and also in Indonesia there is no accreditation system yet. Actually, this National Risk Ethics Committee should be developed the accreditation system, but maybe up to now there is no system that is applied for the accreditation of the Research Ethics Committee in Indonesia. But some of the Research Ethics Committee in Indonesia enrolling in the recognition program of the FERCAP. FERCAP is a Forum Ethics Research Committee in Asia and Western Pacific. They give the capacity building facility by doing the recognition process, like it is not accreditation, but it is like a system where we can use their self-assessment formulaire, and then after that they going to come to our ethics committee and then doing some audit, and then after that they going to give a recommendation for improving the capability of this research ethics committee to review the protocol that is submitted to their ethics committee. Now in Indonesia, maybe around 11 or 12 that is already recognized by this FERCAP. But once again, I I think it is good to using this system. I mean, there is no hierarchical relationship between national or and local IRB in Indonesia, and then the position of each IRB that is belong to university or belong to the research institution or belong to some hospital, for example. They are independently working, and then they just communicate each other to to improve their capacity to review. It is good practice because if we using the hierarchical relationship among the ethic committee, then the independency somehow is going to be deteriorated or become not independent in because it might be happen if the higher ethic committee higher level, even we don't have the level, we don't have the system that put the ethic research ethic committee in Indonesia in different levels, even because we don't have that system also. If for example one research ethic committee decide for the some protocol, have a decision, for example, and then after that, because of the uh, situation, and then after that, it is going to be what it is going to be cancelled by the ethic committee that is have higher level. So it is not good practice. So I think the independency of this research ethic committee should be maintained like this. Thank you.
There is one more, last but not least, one last question from Dr. Zahedi. Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Professor Triwibawa. I like to know about the ethical aspect which are considered in distribution and allocation of vaccine in future in Indonesia. Please, Prof. Triwibawa.
Thank you. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Zaidi, thank you very much. It is very hard question for me especially because we're talking about the ethic consideration to distribute the vaccine. Because before we just discussed the ethical aspect of the research, but this is ethical aspect of the implementation of the vaccination program. So I think it's different aspect. It is different different topic that we have to consider, which I mentioned before is about how we considering the ethic in the research and development. Okay, and my opinion, yeah, the vaccine should be distributed according to the priorities. I mean, we know that the basic principle of vaccine is to protecting person to be infected and then have a clinical manifestation. So if we have a program, in my opinion is that program for the immunization for the COVID-19, the first distribution should be the person that is in the high risk. For example, for the medical worker in the hospital or in the clinic or in the field that is related with the caring of the patient of the COVID-19. And then after that, the other person should be prioritized judging to the risk of the of the of the people or society from being infected by COVID-19. However, it is not easy. It is not easy to saying like that because we need to listen. Everybody, the stakeholders should be come together and discuss about this. Yeah, because we know that we have 270,000 people living in Indonesia population, And then if we think that we need to immunize 70% from the population to get the herd immunity, like the epidemiology is saying, then we need around 100, almost 200 million shot of the vaccine. It is not easy to cover all the need with the production of the vaccine. We need to develop the industries that is able to produce vaccine in Indonesia to cover all the demand of the vaccination. That's the second strategy. And then the next will be the need of the development of the vaccine that is originated from Indonesia. So it is going to be related with the mass production that is might be not enough if we rely on the vaccine that is developed from other countries that is imported, for example. Though they have a commitment to give a bulk vaccine for industries in Indonesia, but maybe it is not enough. So the strategy is we need to develop our own vaccine that is so possibly will be able to produce by our industries and our institution in Indonesia. So that way the need of the vaccine will be covered by many industries that is working in Indonesia. I think that is my opinion. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Salam. Thank you so much. I think we have such great sharing experiences between Indonesia and Iran, especially in tackling COVID-19, both in research as well as in the development of vaccine. Now, at the end of this webinar, I would like to invite Professor Yati Sunarto as the chair of the center to give some appreciation for the speakers.
Thank you, Professor Mubarika. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Distinguished colleague, Professor Ehsan Samsi Kusi, MD PhD from Iran, and Professor Dr. Triwibawa, MD PhD, Specialist Microbiology Consultant. On behalf of the Center for Bioethics and Medical Education, we'd like to express our gratitude for your willingness to share your insight here with us. And I believe that this will be very valuable, and we do hope that you will be willing to share with other issues, important issues, for the next time we invite you. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Let's give big applause for both speakers, and thank you so much. And please don't be, maybe sometimes in the future, we would like to invite you again to talk and to share with us about other aspects related to ethics. Thank you very much for everybody in this afternoon webinars. I do hope that we will see again soon next week or sometimes on Wednesday, every Wednesday. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam
Thank you.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you very much, Professor
everybody.
Ehsan.
Thank you, Dr. Ehsan.
Doctor.
Thank you
Terima
very much,
kasih.
Professor Wibawa. It was great to talk with you and participate in this webinar with you. And thank you for the organizers also. And just to say that here in Iran, we are ending the morning. And so this webinars connect us from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, thank you so much.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih.
Stay safe,
Bye.
Prof.
Makasih
Bye-bye.
Pak Tri.
Terima kasih, Prof.
Ji,
Tri.
sami-sami.
Matur nuwun sedaya.
Mohon izin list di Prof.
Makasih Prof Rika, Bu Yati.
Di Prof Safa, di
Salam.
Bu Erlin, Bu Safa.
Prof. Tri jam 3 rapat Prof. Tri ya.
Ji Prof.
Makasih Prof Tri, interaktif lagi.
Halo, Prof. Yayi. Tuh, where are you? Where are you?
Oh, Prof.
At home.
Assalamualaikum Prof. Ali Hussein.
At home yang gambarnya mboneng di kuwi ya Mbak ya.
Nah, ono isi.
Hah?
Prof. Ali Hussein.
Masih.
Assalamualaikum. How are you? Ali Hussein. Apa ya?
Very good afternoon.
Very good afternoon from all of us, Pak Narto,
Warm
Aziz,
regards
Rika,
from Prof.
warm
Narto.
regards, Dewi,
Iki sing muniki.
Aziz. Mbak Prof. Safa, kok lama enggak ketemu?
Halo Ibu, ini saya di sini.
Besok Rebo ya, siapa
Bravo
Rebo?
ya, Prof. Sis. Prof. Sis.
Kapan proses? Makasih. Prof. Safa kapan ngisi?
Makasih.
Nanti kalau sudah ada waktunya, sudah ada
Matur
tempat.
nuwun.
Oh, Romo.
Ya Romo.
Romo
Besok bahaya tuh.
bangun tidur.
Enggak
Ayo
lah
bangun
ya.
tidur.
Enggak kok.
Romo bangun tidur.
Hehehe.
Jembatan Colomadu pun di mau.
Apa?
Ini jembatan Colomadu kira-kira.
Oh iya ini. San Francisco lah ya.
San Francisco
Colomadu itu
Indonesia.
Kurang bergengsi.
Romo.
Kurang bergengsi Colomadu.
Colomadu.
Bu Syafa di mana toh? Kok lama enggak ketemu?
Surabaya, Madura.
Saya di rumah ya ngerjain ini kemarin ngerjain untuk nanti tanggal 25 saya ngisi kan.
Oh iya. Terima kasih.
Bu Safa nilainya. Tak tagih neng kene bet.
Aku ki apa jenengane deadline-nya numpuk-numpuk dadi ngantek bingung aku.
Nanti dead tenan gitu ya Bu ya. Deadline-nya numpuk-numpuk dari dead tenan ngono.
Tidak tenang. Romo
Ora dikerjake dadine. Detenan kan ora dikerjake.
di mana kok ngangeni lho Romo? Bu Syafa ya, Prof. Safa.
Nggih lho.
Ibu anu Bu, remen apa amping mboten?
Apa?
Amping.
Pasti kersa dong.
Lho pripun? Prof sama saya kok nggak ditawani cuma Prof Yati aja piye toh?
Karena
Ya kan beliau mereka yang di CBMH, Romo salahnya sendiri nggak lari ke CBMH.
Loh.
Kalau lari ke CBMH kebagian.
Thanks to CBMH and everyone of the team for organizing this event. See you next time. Thank you so much, Professor Arif Hussein.
Ya,
Hope to see you again sometime.
Ya, hope to see you again ya. You speak on our next Wednesday.
Yeah,
We have a Wednesday event meeting every Wednesday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oke, terima kasih.
Ini ada Mas Azid, Mbak Rika, Mbak Dewi, Mbak Rizky,
Halo Mas Azid.
Pak Narto. Mas Azid,
Matur nuwun.
Mas Azid sederhana menanti Mas Azid.
kapan? Ayo.
Kareng.
Kapan?
Prof Yayi.
Ini sederhana menanti ini. Senengannya Mas Azid sederhana, Prof.
Sederhana. Mau kok dikirimin ya Mas Azid. Mas Azid sing guyu-guyu aku sing kena.
Biasanya nggak dikirimin, Prof, tapi ngajak ke sana.
Ngajak ke sana. Sing diajak ning Mas Azid.
Oh, Jan.
Oh, anu.
Prof Safa sing diajak Mas Azid tok. Liyane ora.
Mary Romo, Mary maning Romo.
Terima kasih.
Oke, thank you very much. Ciao, thank you.
Ampun, Ji. Monggo, assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam Pak Ageng.
Thanks to Prof. Yati.
Oh,
Prof.
thanks.
Arif Hussein.
Oh, Prof. Arif Hussein, thank you. Oh, I see you. You mute your mic, right? Oh, mine. Oh, ini di mute mana kok? Lah yang bermasalah. Oh, ditulis wae, Mbak. Tulis, Mbak. Ada ditulis. Oh,
Tapi dengar.
oh, I see. But you hear our voice, right? Yeah. Thank you very much. We do hope that we will meet you again next Wednesday because we always have this
And
kind of
Professor
meeting.
Safa will
And Professor Safa will the presenter for the next 20, Professor Shafa. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam from Prof. Rika, Prof. Narto, Mas Ajit, Mbak Wika, Mbak Dewi, Mbak Rizky. To you.
and Mas Dedi.
Mas Dedi, oh ya. From all of us. Bye. Assalamualaikum. Yes.
Congratulations you to